Star Wars Hunters currently has an array of characters inspired by major character types and species such as Mon Calamari, Wookiees, Stormtroopers, a droideka piloted by an Ugnaught and more, and we also know that a KX droid, a Trandoshan and a Twi'lek are on the way. So in today's video I thought it would be fun to talk about 10 hunters that I would like to see added to the game at some point in the future. Now before I do get into that though, make sure you are subscribed to the channel with the notification bell turned on so that you never miss a piece of Star Wars Hunters news. Now it is worth adding that this list is in no particular order and it is simply just 10 random species and characters that I would really like to see added into the game. So the first hunter that I'd like to see is a clone trooper. We already have a stormtrooper, so having the soldier that came before it could create a really interesting rivalry, and naturally the clone will have a lot of history as well, so they could really dive into that with the story. Now obviously like Captain Rex was in Star Wars Rebels, he'd be a little bit of an old boy, but I think it would still be really cool, and obviously the potential for skins is absolutely ridiculous with all of the different clone armor types and clone legions. Number 2 on the list is an Ewok. The Ewok Hunter reinforcement worked really well in Star Wars Battlefront 2, and it certainly provided a very unique experience, so I think it would be equally as unique and interesting to see in Star Wars Hunters. Ewoks are obviously very primal creatures, so their weapons and abilities will be very different to anything else that the other hunters are using, and I think that is a big reason as to why I'd like to see it. The third hunter that I'd like to see is a Zygarian. Zygarians are pretty synonymous with slavery in Star Wars, as we've seen in the Clone Wars and Bad Batch TV shows, so I think it would be really interesting to see that come into the story in some way. But even if that doesn't happen, they do also have really cool weapons with the energy bow and the shock whip, so I feel like they'd be really fun weapons to use in a game like Hunters. Number 4 is a Tusken Raider. Tuskens are a huge part of Star Wars and more specifically Tatooine, and we have Utuni in the game already, which is obviously a pair of Jawas, so it seems only fair to add a Tusken as well. Now it would probably feel a little bit weird seeing a Tusken outside of Tatooine, as we've never actually seen that before as far as I'm aware, whereas Jawas we obviously have, but I really don't think it would be an issue. Fifth on the list, and therefore halfway through, is a Gungan. Gungans are fun and silly beings, as we saw from Jar Jar and others in the Clone Wars, so I think they'd be a really funny hunter to add to the game, and they're obviously pretty iconic to us fans as well, so it just absolutely makes sense to have. Gungans also have some pretty cool weaponry, so this hunter could have a Gungan shield and spear for example, and then they could have an ability using one of their boomers. The sixth hunter I'd like to see is a reprogrammed B1 battle droid. This would be great as they're obviously a huge part of Star Wars, and since I want a clone hunter, this B1 would rival the clone perfectly. There's also quite a bit of scopes for the cosmetics here as well, so I would definitely be really keen to see that. Now since we've just had the B1, I think it seemed only right to add their creators, the Geonosians. A Geonosian hunter would be really cool and could link up pretty well with the B1 I think, and there's definitely some interesting scope for weapons and abilities, so I think there would actually be some really interesting creative decisions made. Obviously a lot of the Geonosian population perished at the hands of the Empire, but as we saw in Star Wars Rebels, a new queen egg was being protected, which would then help to repopulate the species once it had hatched. So I think by the time Hunters is set, the Geonosian population would hopefully be thriving, and we could definitely see one in the game. Now this 8th hunter is pretty unique, but I'd love to see an astromech in the game as a hunter. They could be programmed to have a pretty unique personality, a little bit like Chopper from Star Wars Rebels, and as such could use its arms and other arsenal to help allies in combat and take out other hunters. There are also tons and tons of cosmetics that you could do for this hunter, especially when you're looking at cosmetics inspired by other characters. And I also think BB-8 and BB-9E worked really well in Battlefront 2, and I know they're not quite astromechs, but given they worked really well in Battlefront 2, I think an astromech would work even better in Star Wars Hunters. Now the penultimate hunter that I'd like to see is a Quarren. We've seen them a lot in Star Wars over the years, and in the Clone Wars we saw a quick war between the Quarren and Mon Calamari, so they could definitely play into that with this hunter's story, especially since we already have a Mon Calamari in the game with Sprocket. Now the final hunter in at number 10 that I'd love to see is an Neimoidian. They're pretty iconic in Star Wars, and obviously the Trade Federation were a huge cause of the Clone Wars even starting, as we saw in the Phantom Menace, so they could possibly play into that with regards to the story, but even if they didn't, I think they would be a pretty cool species to add into the game. So guys, they are my current top 10 hunters that I would like to see coming to the game at some point in the future. Star Wars obviously has a huge list of species and character types that we could see, so let me know what you think of my list and tell me some of your ideas in the comments below. That is going to be it from me today though. Thank you all very much for watching, and may the force be with you always.